Hey everybody, Mark Dawes here, and I thought I'd do this video today because I keep getting asked this quite a lot, and that is, how did I start off in the business? What's my backstory? What obstacles did I have to overcome to get where we are today? So I thought I'd give you this story if it's of interest to you. I hope it is. The aim in giving you this story is to hopefully for some of you see that you're probably where I was 30 years ago now, and you can do whatever it is that you want to do in life to make your passion into your profit. And that's what this story is about fundamentally. So let's just start with my background. I mean, I was, went to school like everyone else. I didn't come from a rich parenthood. My parents, were average parents with average incomes. My father worked as a shipping clerk. My mother worked as a cleaner in hotels. We had a pretty modest home. So there was never a lot of money around. And, I wasn't a great achiever at school. I think I left school with two qualifications, maths and technical drawing, I think. But at 16, I joined the Royal Navy, and that was good for me because I needed the discipline. I was a little bit of a rogue in my younger days, and I loved the life. It suited me down to the ground, and I worked my way through the ranks. And at 25, I was probably the youngest petty officer in the fleet for my trade. So I'd done okay, And then I got offered a commission to become a pilot. I turned it down two or three times, and in the end, through advice of friends, I went and did it. I went through for pilot, should I say? I became an officer. I wasn't a very good pilot because I wasn't very disciplined. So in the end, they said, look, go and work as an observer in the Navy, which is equivalent to a navigator. And I was doing that, but then something happened which changed my whole life and made me leave, and that was there was a problem with my pension. There'd been, we'll call it a misunderstanding for want of a better word, and I found out that I was no longer on a pensionable career as an officer, which means that I had to do a whole load of time with no pension enhancements. But if I'd stayed as a petty officer, I would have had my pension. So I was probably better off staying there. So after a lot of rigmarole, I felt pretty aggrieved by the system. I particularly didn't get on with one senior officer. So I resigned my commission and I walked out the door. And I went from being a commissioned officer, living in a wardroom, having worked my way up through the ranks, a wardroom's like the officer's mess, sorry, having worked my way up through the ranks to leaving £4,000 in debt and living in a bedsit in West London. Now I'm only 5'8", but this room was so small that we actually had to cut the end off the bed. I used to have to sleep with my legs bent. That's all I could afford. I had a job selling insurance door to door. I did other odd jobs, and basically at the end of the day, I'd look at my money. I'd figure out whether I wanted half a pint of beer or go and buy a pie, and that's fundamentally where I ended up at the age of 28 when I left the Navy. But I worked hard. I did lots of door to door selling. I sold insurance door to door. I met Deborah, who was soon to become my wife. I think she took pity on me actually, but she was a great influence in my life and helped me immensely. It gave me some confidence because going from being an officer to leaving and all that, it did knock your confidence a bit. And I blagged my way into a job with Apple Computers. I couldn't even work a computer at the time, but I blagged my way into a job because I met a guy in a pub, and he had bottles of champagne all over the place. There were people hanging around him, and I was sitting there with my half pint of beer because that's all I could afford. And I went to the toilet, and he was in there, and I just had to ask him the question. I said, mate, what is it you do? How have you got so much money? And he said, oh, I've just earned £30,000. Now I actually thought that meant he earned £30,000 a year, and I went, wow, you're on £30,000 a year, which back in the late '80s was a lot of money. And he said, no, I've made £30,000 this month on commission. And I went, well, I said, I've got to do what you do. I've got to, give me a card. I'll contact you. So the poor fella, drunk as he was, gave me his card. I badgered him and badgered him. Eventually got an interview, and I got a sales position with Apple Computers, selling computers in West London. And I went into the sales room, and I was learning the craft. I went on courses with Apple. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But I didn't know anything about computers. So I thought, I've got to do something different. I can't sell over the phone. So I basically went out and arranged meetings and went to see people. And with a bit of networking and, a bit of relationship building, I ended up in a short period of time being the second highest paid computer consultant for Apple in the UK. So that was good. I was achieving something, and all of a sudden, my ego went up, my confidence went up, and I thought, man, I am good at this. So as a result of that, I thought I must be a good salesman. Therefore, I'm a good businessman. So I bought a gym, a ladies' toning studio in Richmond, in West London, a place called Sheen. And I've soon found out that although I was a good salesman, I wasn't a good businessman. and I very quickly got into debt. The studio was running at a loss, and I went from earning a six-figure income as a second highest paid consultant for Apple in the UK to £80,000 in debt, and it destroyed me, literally destroyed me. I mean, I didn't feel like a man. I couldn't provide for my family. Deborah and I were now married. We had our first child, and it was a dark place. We were looking at the house being repossessed, and I could even remember looking at the back garden. We had a huge tree in the back garden, and thinking, why don't I just hang myself from the tree? It would solve a lot of problems. I'm not worth anything. I'm not making any money. I can't support my family. I felt at the lowest point of my life. But Deborah, she went out. She was brilliant. She worked. She earned all the money for us. She supported the whole family. I mean, how she put up with me, God only knows. I mean, it was a bad time. But I got a job as a prison officer in the end. I decided to become a prison officer, and it wasn't brilliant money compared to what I was earning, but it was good money, and it paid the bills, and I was grateful for the job. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed being back in uniform. I enjoyed the camaraderie, and I worked with young offenders. And this is when things started to happen. I mean, I was on a training course one day with a friend of mine, and we were sat on this training course, and there were two people delivering the training, and it was poor, absolutely poor. And I couldn't help myself. At the break, I called these trainers over and I said, "Look, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how much do you get paid a day to deliver this training?" And they said, "We get £300 a day." And I went, "What?" I said, "You get £300 a day for two of you. You get £150 each." He went, "No, no, no. We get £300 each." So they were on £600 a day together. And sometimes you open your mouth and words just come out. That's what I'm like. I don't have a filter. Or I didn't have. I still don't think I've got one. And I just said, "But you're crap." And they said, "What?" I said, "No, seriously." I said, "I don't mean any offense." I said, "Your training is poor. It's terrible." I said, "You're getting £300 a day each." I said, "That's phenomenal." And I turned around to my buddy and I said, "Let's set up a training company and let's do that." And he went, "Yeah." I thought I could, £300 a day. I could live on that. So that's what we did. But he didn't want to do it in the end. He bottled it. So I went out and started trying to sell my wares for £300 a day. Now, I was also running martial arts clubs at the time. I was teaching self-defense for local crime prevention panels, and I was being introduced to various companies, on a networking basis, and personal safety training. And that was good. So I get the odd gig for £300 a day, which was a nice little part-time business. But I had my self-defense class at my jiu-jitsu schools. And I wanted to be, my own boss. I wanted to have my own business. That was fundamentally it. And for all of you that teach martial arts out there or self-defense out there, if you're anything like me, that's your goal. You want to turn your passion into profit. You want to turn your vacation into your vocation. You want to do what it is you love for a living and get paid for it so you can support your family and lead the lifestyle you want. And that was my dream. That's what I wanted to do. So I did what everyone else did. I went all around the country on courses. I went to gradings. In those days, it took 5 years to get to black belt. And I eventually spent loads and loads of money. I got my black belt and I started operating as a black belt in the clubs. And as a lot of you will know, and I'm pretty sure you're nodding right now, I ended up paying for my passion because sometimes we never made enough money to cover the mat fees, so didn't have enough people on the mat. So we had the hall hire, and sometimes I was paying out my own pocket to teach people after 5 years of training and investment in myself. And I just thought, wow, I've hit a wall now. I'm never going to make this into a business. I'm never going to make money out of this. It's never going to be my full-time job. And it was depressing. It was sad because I put all that time and effort in. And then one day a woman turned up at the class. She actually turned up. She was sat on the side. And at the end of the class, she approached me and she said, "Look, my son's being badly bullied at school. Bullied to the point that he's really depressed." She goes, "Now he needs to learn this. I'd love him to learn martial arts. I'd love him to learn self-defense, but he won't come." And this is a true fact for a lot of people out there. The people that really need it won't come because their self-confidence is so low. So she said this to me. She said, "Can you teach me so I can teach him? Because I want him to be able to defend himself, but he won't come." And I went, "Yeah, why not? Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that." And she said, "Look, I'll pay you. I'll pay you. I can't afford much." I said, "No, no, I'll do it. I'll do it for free." Interestingly, a few of the other black belts there said, "No, you can't do that. If she wants to teach, she's got to be a black belt. She's got to do her 5 years because you can't teach unless you're a black belt." And I thought, hang on, why? And it confused me for a minute. And then, I've got a bit of clarity. And I said, "Do you know if you join the armed forces, you can do 36 weeks training, I think it was at the time, to become a Royal Marine Commando?" I said, "And at the end of that 36 weeks training, you'll have, weapon skills and demolition skills and survival skills and fieldcraft skills." I said, are you going to turn around to one of these commandos and say, by the way, you can't do any unarmed combat, which is what the Royal Marines are famous for, by the way. You can't do any more unarmed combat unless you do another 4 years or 5 years to get a black belt. I said, you'd be laughed out the military. So I said, no, I'm going to do it. So I started teaching her this. And then the word got around, and I was approached by a local crime prevention panel, and they said, look, we want to run personal safety and self-defense classes. Would you work with the police and help us do that? So the police will do the talk, they'll do the personal safety stuff, they'll talk about the law, and you can do the physical stuff. And I thought, great, absolutely brilliant, because I'll learn loads of stuff from the police about the law. That was my thinking. So we went off on the course, and the police officer working was a great guy, and we had companies. We used to run 2-hour sessions once a week after work for companies, chemical companies and haulage companies and all sorts of companies. And they were brilliant. They were great fun. And then one day on a course, a woman, at the end, we were having a feedback session, and this woman said, can I ask a question? And I said, yeah, sure. She said, look, you've taught us all this stuff, all this physical, and it's all great, and we love it, and it's fun. But can you tell us what reasonable force actually means, please? Because, you keep saying you can use force that's reasonable, and could you tell us what it means? So I immediately pointed at the police officer on my right, and I said, that's exactly what this guy's here to do, and he'll tell you, and it'll be brilliant. And I thought, great, I'll get a pen and paper out because I'll learn something here, and started to write things down. And this is what he said, and I'll never forget it. He said, the law says you can use force that's reasonable in the circumstances, and if you do that, and you end up in a court of law, provided the force is reasonable, you'll probably not be found guilty of a crime. But if you use force that's unreasonable, therefore excessive, and you go to court, and the court decide that you did use force excessive, then what you did was unreasonable, and you'll be found guilty of a crime. And all these people, including me, looked at him and went, what does that mean? And he repeated it again. And this woman said, well, that's a fat lot of good, because what's the point in learning all this if we don't know when we can legally do it? And we were losing the group. And what possessed me, I don't know. But I said, I'll tell you what I'll do for you. We're due back next week. I'll find out exactly what reasonable force means, and I'll come back next week and I'll tell you. The morale of the group picked up, and they all went away happy, looking forward to the actual following course the following week. The police officer turned around to me and he said, good luck with that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, look, we work with lawyers all the time. We're in and out of court all the time. We work with the Crown Prosecution Service. He said, they train for 5 years to be a lawyer, and they still can't explain what reasonable force means because there is no precise definition of it in law. So good luck with that. And I thought, look at me, what have I bitten off here? But it wasn't going to stop me because I'd made a promise. So I went out and I read books, and I went to the library, and I used to go in the library every spare hour and read law books, and I didn't understand what they meant. I mean, I was a 16-year-old lad that left school with no qualifications, basically, and I'm now, a man trying to read a book. Couldn't figure it out. I couldn't understand the legal language. So I paid to go and see lawyers, and I spoke to them, and they would talk to me in language I didn't understand. I did all this in a week, but I had enough to go back the following week. And when we went back, I said, right, I promised you I'll tell you about reasonable force. This is what I found out. And I gave them a little talk on it. And it was about a 10-minute talk, as I recall. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And we got their confidence back, and we got their trust back. And I went and did the same the week after. We had a further 4 weeks. It was a 6-week course. And I got quite fascinated with this. And I thought, this is interesting. So I started to ask people, if you had to defend yourself, what would you want to know? And they didn't say technique. They said, we'd like to know what the law means. So I started to study it and study it, study it. And, that took me off on a journey. And as a result of that, I've written books on it because it became, my way of learning is I need to write things down. So I wrote things down. Eventually I had a book, I put it out, I published it, became a published author on reasonable force. I've spoken nationally on this stuff. And we've built a business now, where we teach self-defense and we teach physical restraint and conflict management. And I believe we have one of the most legally defensible courses available in the UK today because of the amount of legal input we actually have in those courses, because of the learning that I've gone through. And I've had the privilege of working with great lawyers like Michael Mansfield. I've interviewed him, the late, great Gary Slapper, who was the head of law for the Open University, John Wadham, Eric Baskin. These are eminent legal people who've been gracious enough. I mean, I've had to pay a lot of them, but still they were gracious enough to give me the time to interview them on video and on audio and, learn all this stuff. And we put all that into our courses, and that's why we have people from all over the world come and train with us today. We have people in Hong Kong, we have people in Australia, we've got people out in the Middle East who've come and trained with us in the past and in Gibraltar, and they come not for the technique, They come because of the actual knowledge that underpins the technique. So why am I telling you all this? Well, the reason I'm telling you all this is look, if a 16-year-old kid with no qualifications and no prospects, who then leaves the Navy after 12 years, 4 grand in debt, and then ends up getting 80 grand in debt, can build a business that works, that's sustainable, that consistently makes profit, and we have no overheads, we have no loans whatsoever. If I can do that, you can do that too. So that's my message to you. Do it. But here's the thing, you know, don't do what everyone else does because you'll get the same results everyone else gets. If you want to be successful, model successful people in your industry sector, whatever that is, right? To find out who the people are that are being successful, that have turned their passion into profit, that have turned their vacation into a vocation, that are doing what they love and making a lifestyle out of it. I'm fortunate enough now. I'm able to live where I want. I'm able to do to a great degree much what I want. I'm able to provide for my family and give them the quality of life that I want to give them. And that was the drive that drove me to where I am now. And many of you watching this will be like that too. So if that's what you want to do, never give up. Go and do it. Follow your passion. You've only got one life on this planet, and you have to live it. Okay. And if you want to find out more about us, then Google me. Google NFPS Limited will come up. If you want to be a self defense trainer and you want to learn all this stuff, come on one of our courses. You want to be a restraint trainer, you want to learn all this stuff, come on our course. We've got tons of stuff out there we can give you and teach you. But that's what I wanted to. That's the message I want to get out to you today, because there's a lot of you, honest to God, out there right now, I believe, who have the capacity and the ability to actually turn your life around and to leave that mundane thing. I mean, I enjoy being a prison officer, but my God, it was boring after a while. I couldn't see myself doing that as a career. I couldn't see myself working in an office 9 to 5. I can't see myself getting in a train or getting on a train at 6:30 every morning to ride to London, and then come home at 9 o'clock every night so I don't see my kids. See them growing up and missing birthday parties. I can't do that. That's not me, and I don't think many of you can too. So if you want to, do it, go for it. Go and find people who are successful. Model what they do. Don't copy what they do. Don't rip off what they do. Go and model the process. Speak to them, learn from them, but actually do it. You've got one life. You need to live it. And if you do that, it will transform your life for the better. It's not about the end game, actually. It's never about what you achieve. It's about the route to success and what you learn on the way. Hope that helps. Speak to you all soon.